Some books don't tell you what to do. They don't scream answers, they just walk beside you quietly, like a friend who's been through it all. And when you're at your lowest, they sit beside you, say nothing, but their silence holds you. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is that kind of book. Doesn't entertain you, it transforms you. It doesn't give you hope in the way a motivational quote might. It gives you hope because it was written by a man who watched everything he loved burn away and still found a reason to live. Frankl was a psychiatrist living in Austria when the Nazis took power. He had a promising career, patients who loved him, a manuscript he had poured his heart into, and a family. Then came the war, and like millions of others, he was arrested, sent to Auschwitz, one of the most brutal Nazi concentration camps. He was stripped of his name, his clothes, his dignity. All that remained was his number, 119104. They shaved his head. They burned his manuscript. And the people he loved most, his wife, his parents, his brother, were gone. Just gone. But even in the nightmare that was Auschwitz, Frankl chose to observe not just the horror, but the humanity inside the horror. He started to ask, why do some people survive longer than others here? Why do some prisoners give up and die, while others cling to life, even without food, without warmth, without family? And what he discovered was that survival wasn't about strength. It wasn't about youth or health or muscles. It was about meaning. Frankl began to notice something strange. Prisoners who had something to live for, no matter how small, could endure the unendurable. One man survived because he wanted to finish writing a scientific book. Another because he dreamed of reuniting with his daughter. One more simply remembered the face of his wife each morning. Frankl himself survived by imagining her. He didn't know if she was alive, but just the thought of her, the memory of her kindness, was enough to carry him through a freezing 12-hour work shift, barefoot in the snow, with 400 grams of stale bread in his stomach. He writes, "The salvation of man is through love and in love. Even if your beloved is gone, even if the world around you is burning, the love you carry inside can give you strength." There was a moment in the book that broke me. Frankl is walking through a barren field in the early morning, completely numb. The sun is rising through the mist. He's weak, starving, frozen, and suddenly he sees the beauty in that moment. A strange peace settles over him. He realizes no one can take away from you the meaning you assign to your suffering. That was the turning point of the book. Not an escape, not a rescue, but a decision. A choice to say, I will not let this suffering be meaningless. You see, most of us think the point of life is to be happy. But Frankl says, number, the point of life is to find meaning. And when you do, happiness comes as a side effect, but meaning stays. It holds you together when everything else falls apart. That's what he calls logotherapy. his school of psychotherapy. It's built around one idea. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. A quote he borrowed from Nietzsche. In Auschwitz, Frankl began testing this. He helped fellow prisoners cope by finding their why. He encouraged them to imagine their future work, their children, their art, their healing, not as fantasy, but as anchors. And he saw something remarkable. Even those who were on the edge of collapse could endure a little longer if they had a reason. Let me stop here and ask you something. What is your why? Not the perfect life you wish you had, not the person you miss or the house you want to buy, but something inside you, small, quiet, that says, I'm still here, so maybe there's something I still need to do. It doesn't have to be grand. Frankl says meaning can be found in 3 ways: through work or creation, something you bring into the world; through love, relationships, memories, connection; and through suffering when you choose to face it with dignity. Yes, even suffering can become meaningful if you give it a voice, if you refuse to let it be wasted. And that is what Viktor Frankl did. He survived the camps, he rebuilt his life, he rewrote the book that was destroyed, and he changed the way millions of people look at pain. I'll continue the rest of the book in the next part, where Frankl returns to normal life and faces a new challenge: the challenge of surviving peace after surviving war, and how meaning must be rebuilt even in freedom. Until then, I leave you with this. Sometimes the meaning of life doesn't come to you. You create it out of the ashes, out of the silence, out of your deepest wound, and it's there in the stillness that your soul begins to whisper back. What no one tells you about survival is that coming back to life hurts in its own way. We think the moment of freedom is full of joy. We imagine people running out of the camps, falling to their knees, crying with gratitude. But Frankl says it wasn't like that. No one cried. No one even felt anything. Because when you've lived in numbness long enough, even joy forgets how to move through your body. Frankl writes that when the gates opened, prisoners didn't cheer. They didn't hug or celebrate. They looked around, unsure. One man bent down and touched the earth as if asking it whether it was real. Another began to walk aimlessly out into the fields. Frankl himself describes it like this: we had literally lost the ability to feel pleased and had to relearn it slowly. Because the pain didn't end with freedom, it just changed shape. When Frankl returned home, he had lost almost everything. His wife, gone. His parents, gone. His manuscript, destroyed. His career, erased. And yet, he writes, I knew I had to make something of this suffering. I had to find a reason it hadn't destroyed me. So what did he do? He sat down and he wrote. He poured his experience into words. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't pretend to be heroic. He wrote the raw truth about despair, brutality, and the tiny flickers of humanity in between. But more than that, he shared a roadmap, a quiet, steady light for anyone lost in the darkness. Let me tell you what I love about this book most. It doesn't claim that meaning is easy or that we're supposed to always find it in the moment. Sometimes meaning only shows up in hindsight. And that's okay. Frankl says suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. That doesn't mean the pain disappears, but it means it transforms from a wound to a message, from chaos to clarity. You may be wondering, how does one actually practice logotherapy? Let me explain. In Frankl's own way, he says that people don't need therapy that only talks about the past. They need to be shown how to live now, how to find meaning today in whatever mess they're in. So he offers 3 paths. First, through creative work. Frankl says if you can make something anything that contributes to life, you will find meaning. It could be a painting, a poem, an invention, a conversation, even a small act of kindness. Creation connects us to purpose through love. Even in the camps, love saved lives. The memory of a face, the sound of a voice in your head, the silent bond between one soul and another. He believed that through love, we see not only the beauty of the other, but we see ourselves as someone who can love, and that in itself gives life value. Through suffering, this is the most powerful and the most difficult. When there is nothing left to change, when the pain is unavoidable, you still have the power to change yourself. You can face your suffering with dignity. You can choose not to break. You can decide to give it meaning. Frankl tells the story of a man who had lost his wife and was deeply depressed. He asked the man, "What if you had died first and your wife had lived to mourn you? How would she have suffered?" The man said, "Terribly." Frankl replied, "Then your suffering has spared her that fate. You are carrying the grief for both of you." The man didn't say anything, but after a long pause, he stood taller. Sometimes meaning doesn't fix the pain. It simply makes the pain bearable. Let me tell you one more story Frankl shares. He met a young woman who was dying in the camp. She was lying in bed, looking out the window. And you know what she said? "I am grateful that fate has hit me so hard, because now I understand how a tree feels when it blossoms." She pointed at a tree through the window and whispered to it, "You are my only friend." Frankl asked her if she was talking to the tree. She smiled and said, "Yes, and the tree spoke to me too." It said, "I am here. I am life. I am eternal life." That story haunted me because even in death, she chose meaning. She chose connection. She chose love. Frankl never tried to sell happiness. He said happiness is a side effect of meaning, not a goal. When you chase meaning, joy comes quietly behind you. When you chase joy, you often find nothing. So, if you are listening to this tonight and you feel lost and your pain is too heavy to carry, maybe don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, ask, "What can I do with this pain?" What if your story, Yes, your hard, messy, shattered story could help someone else one day. What if this heartbreak is a doorway? Frankl ends the book with a powerful reminder. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. You don't need a perfect life, you need a reason. And I promise you that reason can be quiet. It can be as small as a voice in the night, a sentence in a book, a child's smile, or the sound of your own breath. Meaning doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits until you're still enough to hear it. Thank you for listening, for trusting me with your heart. I hope this story walked beside you tonight, gently, like a friend in the dark. If it did, stay with me. Let's find the rest of the stories together.